She looked up at the cracked ceiling, where faded blue paint still clung to splintered beams, like scraps of forgotten sky. Dust floated through shafts of afternoon light, and for a long while she simply listened. The ruined chapel was never truly silent. Old timber sighed as though breathing after a long sleep. Somewhere inside the walls, mice rustled through straw that had not been disturbed for years. Wind slipped through broken stained glass, carrying the scent of cedar and distant rain. It sounded less like abandonment than waiting. Adeline gathered the scattered prayer books into careful stacks, despite their ruined bindings. She swept away bird feathers from the front aisle with a branch she had tied together into a rough broom. Every movement seemed to wake another memory buried inside the old building. The floorboards creaked beneath her boots with voices that almost felt human, not frightening, but patient, as though the chapel itself had long expected someone willing to care for it again. By dusk, she had gathered enough fallen timber to repair one shattered window. She covered another opening with heavy canvas bought from an old wagon driver in Brimstone Hollow. The evening air grew cold quickly in the valley, and she knew the nights ahead would test both her resolve and her strength. When darkness settled beyond the hills, she lit a single oil lamp. The tiny flame transformed everything. The broken altar no longer looked abandoned. The carved wooden pews, though cracked with age, seemed ready once more to receive weary travelers. Shadows stretched along the walls like rows of quiet witnesses. Even the faded mural above the altar revealed hints of colors that daylight had hidden. She ate the last of her bread beside the front steps and watched stars emerge above the roof, where half the shingles had disappeared years before. For the first time since losing her parents, she did not feel entirely alone. The following morning, she began repairing the altar itself. Many of the carved oak panels had separated with age. Several decorative stones had collapsed beneath the platform. It would have been easier to tear the entire structure apart and build another one, but Adeline had learned from her father that old things deserved patience before replacement. Everything built with honest hands carries a memory, he had often told her while repairing broken furniture in their workshop. If you listen long enough, it'll teach you how it wants to be mended. She smiled quietly as she remembered those words. Using only a hammer, wooden wedges, and salvaged nails, she carefully removed damaged boards one at a time. Near midday, while lifting an unusually thick oak support from behind the altar, something unexpected happened. The timber refused to move. She pushed harder. Nothing. She examined the edges and realized the board was not nailed at all. It had been fitted deliberately into hidden grooves. Someone had designed it to slide. Her heartbeat slowed. She brushed away decades of hardened dust until narrow finger marks appeared along one edge. Someone had opened this before, long ago. She gripped both sides and pulled. The board shifted barely an inch before stopping again. From somewhere deep inside came the unmistakable sound of metal touching stone. Not loud, not dramatic, just one soft scrape. She froze. Every story she had heard as a child about hidden compartments suddenly returned to her mind. Most were foolish tales, invented to entertain children around winter fires. Yet this felt different. She found a rusted chisel among the chapel's forgotten tools and gently loosened more packed dirt around the edges. Again she pulled. This time the panel slid farther. A narrow opening appeared behind the altar. Cold air escaped from the darkness inside. Not the ordinary coolness of shade, but air that had remained trapped for many years. It carried the faint scent of cedar oil and old paper. Adeline raised the lamp. The compartment extended only a few feet into the stone foundation. Inside rested a small cedar chest, no larger than a bread box. Unlike everything else inside the ruined chapel, the chest showed almost no decay. Its brass hinges were green with age, yet the wood itself remained remarkably well preserved. Someone had protected it carefully. She reached toward it before hesitating. There was no lock, only a strip of faded blue ribbon wrapped once around the lid. The ribbon crumbled at her touch. Very slowly she opened the chest. Inside lay 3 objects: a leather-bound ledger, a bundle of letters tied with faded white cord, and beneath them all, Wrapped inside clean linen that somehow remained untouched by mold, rested an iron key, unlike any she had ever seen. Its handle bore the carving of a small mountain cedar, surrounded by 7 stars. She stared without speaking. There were no coins, no jewels, no gold bars hidden beneath false bottoms. Only paper, only ink, only one mysterious key. For a brief moment, disappointment flickered across her face before curiosity quietly replaced it. Her father had always insisted that paper could change more lives than silver if the right words had been written upon it. She lifted the ledger first. Its leather cracked softly beneath her fingers. Across the cover, pressed in fading gold letters almost erased by time, appeared a single name. The Covenant Register. She frowned. The title meant nothing to her. Opening the first page, she discovered rows upon rows of names written in careful script. Families, dates, property descriptions, witness signatures, entire generations recorded with astonishing precision. Every page described land transfers throughout the valley, stretching back more than 40 years. Many carried official seals that should have been stored inside the county courthouse, not hidden beneath a forgotten chapel. Her confusion deepened. Why would someone conceal such records? She turned another page. Then another. Suddenly, one surname caught her eye. Blackridge. She recognized it immediately. Silas Blackridge, the wealthiest landowner in the valley. The very man whose mills, grazing fields, and warehouses seemed to own nearly everything surrounding Brimstone Hollow. Nearly every struggling family rented land from him. Nearly every merchant borrowed against his grain stores. Even Sheriff Gallo admitted that little happened without Blackridge's approval. Yet the entries before her showed something impossible. Much of the valley had once belonged to dozens of ordinary families. Small farmers, carpenters, teachers, blacksmiths, widows. Every transfer into Blackridge ownership appeared clustered within only a few troubling years. Adeline continued reading. Her breathing grew shallow. Many signatures looked strangely similar despite belonging to entirely different people. Ink colors changed halfway through entries. Several official seals appeared pressed upside down. One witness name repeated dozens of times, even on dates, when that man had reportedly been traveling hundreds of miles away. She was no lawyer, but she had copied enough legal records for merchants during her childhood to recognize irregular bookkeeping. Someone had altered history, not by force alone, by documents. She set the ledger aside and untied the faded letters. The first was addressed simply, to whoever finds this after we are gone. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the brittle pages. The handwriting belonged to an elderly minister named Elias Merriweather. He wrote that he and several respected townspeople had uncovered widespread fraud involving valley land deeds. Rather than destroying the evidence, they gathered every authentic record they could rescue before corrupt officials seized them. Knowing powerful men were searching for the documents, they hid them inside the chapel beneath the altar, trusting that someday an honest soul, not a wealthy one, not an influential one, but an honest one, would uncover the truth when the valley needed it most. Adeline lowered the page slowly. Outside, wind moved gently through the cedar trees. The chapel no longer felt merely abandoned. It felt entrusted. She looked again at the strange iron key resting inside the cedar chest. Beneath it lay one final folded note. Only 7 words had been written across the yellowed paper. The key opens what the ledger cannot prove. Adeline read the sentence again until every word settled into her thoughts, with the weight of a church bell echoing through an empty valley. The key opens what the ledger cannot prove. Whoever had written those words understood that paper alone would never overcome men who had spent years building fortunes upon carefully arranged lies. There had to be something else, something hidden beyond signatures and seals, something that no forged document could erase. She turned the iron key over in her hands, feeling the worn grooves left by another person's fingers many years before. It was surprisingly heavy, fashioned by a skilled blacksmith who intended it to survive generations. 7 tiny stars surrounded the carved cedar tree upon its handle. each point polished smooth by time. She searched every corner of the compartment for another clue, but found only a small scrap of linen stitched with the same 7 stars. Nothing more. The people who had hidden the chest had trusted that whoever discovered it would know how to continue. That faith felt larger than the chapel itself. She wrapped the ledger, letters, and key inside her shawl before sliding the cedar chest back into its hiding place. She left the compartment open only long enough to remember exactly how it had been concealed. If anyone came searching, they must never suspect the secret had already been found. Carefully, she returned the oak panel to its grooves until it appeared untouched by human hands. Dust covered the seams once more, and the altar looked exactly as it had that morning. Yet everything had changed. The valley outside remained peaceful beneath drifting clouds, but Adeline now carried something capable of unsettling every powerful man who claimed authority over it. She spent the rest of the afternoon repairing broken pews simply to quiet her thoughts. Work had always helped her think clearly. As her hammer struck old nails back into place, memories of her father's patient voice returned. He had taught her never to rush toward a mystery before understanding its edges. Truth, he would say, is like a stream beneath winter ice. Break through too quickly, and you'll lose your footing. Find where the current already runs, and it'll carry you. By sunset, she decided that no one must know what she had discovered until she understood every page inside the ledger. For 3 evenings, she scarcely left the chapel, except to gather water from the nearby spring. She read each record beside the lamp until dawn painted pale gold across the cracked windows. Gradually, a pattern emerged. The earliest entries described honest exchanges of land between neighbors. Then, beginning almost 30 years earlier, ownership shifted suddenly. Families disappeared from the records after mysterious debts. Farms sold for impossible prices. Entire orchards transferred to companies that existed only briefly before everything passed into the hands of Silas Blackridge's father, and later to Silas himself. The handwriting changed repeatedly, yet certain flourishes appeared again and again beneath different names. Whoever forged the documents had been careful, but not careful enough. Hidden among the letters was another remarkable discovery. Minister Merriweather had kept notes describing private meetings with several valley elders. One passage spoke of original boundary stones placed when the valley had first been settled. Those stones supposedly marked the true limits of every family's land before fraudulent surveys altered the maps. The minister believed the original survey chest had been hidden somewhere no dishonest official would think to search. Adeline's eyes drifted toward the iron key resting beside the lamp. Could the survey chest still exist? If so, where? She unfolded every remaining letter. Most described growing fear, witnesses disappearing, courthouse fires that destroyed only certain records while leaving the rest untouched. Honest clerks suddenly resigning without explanation. Finally, near the bottom of the last letter, she noticed something she had overlooked before. A tiny sketch, barely larger than a thumbnail. It showed the chapel standing beside a winding creek. Beyond the creek rose 7 cedar trees, arranged in a rough circle. At their center stood a weathered stone cross. Next to the drawing, the minister had written only 3 words: "Where shepherds rested." Adeline frowned. She had explored the hills surrounding the chapel while gathering firewood, but had never seen such a place. Early the following morning, she packed bread, water, the key, and the letters into her satchel, before setting out through the mist. The hills behind the chapel climbed steeply toward rocky ridges covered with cedar and pine. Dew soaked the hem of her dress as she followed little more than animal paths through tall grass. Hours passed. Several times she nearly turned back, believing the sketch represented a place that no longer existed. Then she noticed something unusual. 7 enormous cedar trees stood together, upon a rise overlooking the valley. Time had twisted their trunks into graceful shapes, unlike the younger forest surrounding them. From a distance, they looked almost like old friends leaning close together. Her pulse quickened. She climbed the slope. There, hidden beneath thick moss and years of fallen branches, lay the remains of a stone cross, scarcely visible above the earth. She knelt beside it. The carving matched the tiny cedar tree engraved upon the iron key. Carefully, she cleared away leaves from the base until her fingers brushed smooth granite, unlike the rough fieldstones nearby. A narrow keyhole appeared beneath centuries of dirt. She stared at it in astonishment. Someone had built a lock into solid stone. Taking a slow breath, Adeline inserted the iron key. It fit perfectly. At first, nothing happened. Then, with steady pressure, the ancient mechanism groaned deep beneath the ground. Birds burst from nearby branches as hidden gears, silent for decades, slowly awakened. The stone cross shifted sideways by only a few inches before stopping. Beneath it appeared a narrow iron ring. Adeline grasped the ring with both hands and pulled. A square slab of granite lifted surprisingly easily, balanced by forgotten counterweights that still functioned despite the passing years. Cool air drifted upward from the darkness below. Stone steps descended into the hillside. She raised her lantern and cautiously entered. The chamber beneath was dry and astonishingly intact. Shelves carved directly into the rock lined the walls. Wooden boxes rested neatly upon them, each marked with names, dates, and the symbols of the valley's founding families. At the center stood an oak chest bound with iron straps. Unlike the cedar chest beneath the altar, this one bore the official seal of the original valley surveyors. Adeline approached almost reverently. Inside, she found rolled maps, tied with waxed cord, brass surveying instruments wrapped in cloth, and dozens of leather tubes containing original land grants bearing signatures so deeply pressed into the parchment that no forger could have copied them. Beneath those documents rested a journal written by the valley's first surveyor, Nathaniel Ashcombe. Its opening pages explained everything. Every boundary, every farm, every shared pasture had been measured fairly and witnessed publicly. Copies had been delivered to the courthouse while the originals remained hidden as protection against corruption. If greed should ever rewrite these hills, Ashcombe had written, let these records speak for those who no longer can. Tears gathered in Adeline's eyes. The minister had not merely preserved evidence. He had preserved the valley's memory itself. She understood now why the ledger alone was not enough. Anyone could accuse written records of being fabricated, but the original maps, surveying tools, field journals, and sealed grants formed an unbroken chain of proof stretching back to the valley's very beginning. Together, they could expose decades of deception. Yet as she carefully repacked the chest, another thought settled heavily upon her. If these documents truly threatened the fortunes of powerful men, then others might already be searching for them. And if word spread that the ruined chapel finally had a new owner, curious eyes would soon begin watching every step she took. Outside the hidden chamber, the afternoon sun had begun slipping behind the western ridge. Long shadows stretched across the valley below, where smoke curled peacefully from chimneys and children chased one another through fields that many families believed they owned, only because history had forgotten the truth. Adeline looked toward Brimstone Hollow in the fading light, unaware that from the porch of the Blackridge estate, a distant figure stood with binoculars raised toward the lonely chapel on the hill, wondering why its broken windows glowed every night again after so many years of darkness. The figure lowered the binoculars slowly and remained standing upon the wide porch of Blackridge Manor while evening settled over the valley. Silas Blackridge had spent nearly 40 years studying people before they ever realized they were being watched. He recognized habits, patterns, and ambitions long before others spoke them aloud. The abandoned chapel had stood lifeless for years, its broken roof surrendering to storms, its bells silent beneath vines. Yet now smoke curled from its chimney every morning, a lamp glowed behind repaired windows each night, and fresh footprints appeared around the spring below the hill. Someone had begun breathing life into a place most people had forgotten existed. That alone interested him. His steward, Horace Fenwick, approached quietly from the doorway. Still looking toward the chapel, sir. Blackridge nodded without removing his gaze. Find out who bought it. Horace adjusted his spectacles. We've already asked in town. They say it was purchased by an orphan girl, barely more than 20 years old. Blackridge's expression hardly changed. Girls do not spend their last coins on collapsing buildings unless they are either desperate or hiding from something. Horace smiled thinly. Or simply foolish. Blackridge finally lowered the binoculars. Foolish people do not repair windows before winter. The steward said nothing. Go tomorrow, Blackridge continued. Introduce yourself politely. Offer to purchase the property for 3 times what she paid. Horace looked surprised. The chapel itself has little value. Exactly, Blackridge replied, which is why I wish to know why she refuses. The following morning, Adeline awoke before sunrise to the familiar chorus of meadowlarks beyond the broken bell tower. She carried 2 buckets to the spring, humming one of the hymns her mother used to sing while kneading bread. The valley seemed unusually peaceful. Mist drifted through the cedars, softening every hill into shades of silver. For a brief hour, it was easy to imagine that no greed had ever touched this place. Returning toward the chapel, she noticed fresh wagon tracks in the damp earth. They had not been there when she left. Instantly, her steps slowed. A polished carriage stood outside the front gate. 2 fine horses stamped impatiently, while a neatly dressed gentleman examined the weathered stone walls with open curiosity. He removed his hat as she approached. Miss Adeline Rowan, I presume? She did not answer immediately. I am Horace Fenwick, steward to Mr. Silas Blackridge. She felt her grip tighten upon the water buckets. What brings you here? Horace smiled with practiced warmth. My employer heard someone had undertaken the noble task of restoring this unfortunate building. He admires industry. Adeline remained silent. Horace continued. Mr. Blackridge wonders whether you might consider selling. Naturally, he would compensate you generously. I bought the chapel to keep it. For $30. That is correct. Horace reached inside his coat and removed a folded bank draft. Mr. Blackridge offers $100 today. Adeline looked at the paper but made no move toward it. No, Horace blinked. Perhaps you misunderstood. I understood perfectly. $100 is more than 3 times your investment. Then your employer should invest it elsewhere. The steward's smile remained, though it had grown noticeably thinner. May I ask why this chapel matters so much? She met his eyes calmly. May I ask why it matters so much to your employer? For the first time, Horace hesitated. He simply disliked seeing abandoned properties fall further into ruin. Adeline glanced toward the countless neglected buildings scattered across Blackridge's own unused grazing lands. Then he has plenty to repair already. Horace tucked the draft away. If you change your mind, the offer remains. It will not. He bowed politely before climbing back into the carriage. Yet as the horses turned toward town, Adeline noticed him studying every repaired window, every new board, every pile of salvaged timber surrounding the chapel. He was not merely visiting, he was inspecting. That evening she moved every document from beneath her bed to the hidden chamber beneath the 7 cedars. Carrying the precious records 1 bundle at a time beneath moonlight, she hid them inside the survey chest exactly as they had rested before. Only the journal remained with her. If anyone searched the chapel, they would find nothing. Days passed quietly, but the valley itself began changing around her. People who had never before climbed the hill suddenly appeared with convenient excuses. A shepherd claimed to have lost 2 sheep nearby. Hunters wandered unusually close to the chapel despite there being little game in those woods. A traveling merchant asked whether she planned to sell the timber surrounding the property. Every visitor asked harmless questions while allowing their eyes to linger upon the altar, the floorboards, the walls. They searched without appearing to search. Adeline answered kindly but revealed nothing. One afternoon, an elderly woman named Martha Bell arrived carrying a basket of fresh biscuits. Unlike the others, she looked only at Adeline. "You've made this place feel alive again," Martha said softly. "My grandfather helped raise these walls." Adeline invited her inside. As they shared tea brewed from mountain herbs, Martha's gaze settled upon the faded stained glass above the altar. "I was baptized here," she whispered, "long before Mr. Blackridge owned half the valley." Something in her voice encouraged honesty. Adeline asked carefully, "Did your family once own land nearby?" Martha nodded slowly. 40 acres beside Cedar Creek. What happened to it? The old woman's hands became still. My father said he signed loan papers after a difficult harvest. Months later, the sheriff arrived saying we'd signed away the entire farm. Tears shimmered in her tired eyes. Father swore the papers had been changed after he signed them. Adeline listened without interrupting. Martha gave a sad smile. No one believed a poor farmer over wealthy men carrying official documents. After the old woman departed, Adeline sat alone for a long while. Martha's story matched dozens of entries inside the hidden ledger. Suddenly, the records no longer represented anonymous names. They belonged to living people still carrying wounds decades old. She realized then that restoring justice would require more than exposing forged deeds. The valley itself had forgotten its own history. People believed the lies because too many years had passed. Meanwhile, Horace Fenwick delivered his report to Blackridge Manor. Silas listened quietly from his study while polishing an antique watch. She refused $100, Horace concluded. Did she explain why? Only that she intends to keep the chapel. Blackridge closed the watch with a soft click. Increase the offer. To 200? 500. Horace looked genuinely astonished. Sir, the property cannot possibly be worth— I know exactly what it is worth. Blackridge walked to the tall window overlooking his fields. The question is whether she knows. Do you believe she found something? Blackridge's silence answered before his words did. Years ago, he finally said, my father often spoke of records that vanished before certain land transfers were completed. He spent years searching churches, abandoned homes, even cemeteries. Horace frowned. You never mentioned that. Because he never found them. Blackridge looked toward the distant chapel barely visible upon its lonely hill. Now a determined young woman refuses $500 for a ruin no sensible person wanted. He turned slowly. Either she has discovered something, or she soon will, Horace asked quietly. What should be done? Blackridge's expression remained unreadable. Nothing unlawful. He paused. Not yet. But outside the manor, another man had been listening unseen. Stable hand Gideon Pike, while delivering firewood near the study window, had overheard enough to understand one thing. The old chapel mattered far more than anyone in the valley had ever imagined. And by nightfall, word had already begun spreading through Brimstone Hollow that the orphan living alone upon the hill possessed something powerful enough to make the richest man in the valley increasingly uneasy. Within 2 days, the whispers reached every farmhouse scattered across the valley. Some claimed the orphan girl had discovered hidden gold beneath the ruined chapel. Others insisted she had found an old saint's relic capable of bringing pilgrims from distant states. A few laughed at such stories, saying loneliness had simply made people eager to believe in miracles again. Yet no matter how wildly the rumors changed, one detail remained constant. Silas Blackridge wanted the chapel. That alone convinced many people something unusual was happening. Adeline paid little attention to the gossip. Her days settled into a careful rhythm. She repaired the leaking roof one section at a time. She polished the surviving stained glass panels until faded reds and blues once again scattered gentle colors across the stone floor each morning. She planted vegetables beside the old cemetery, where the soil remained rich beneath decades of fallen leaves. The chapel slowly ceased looking abandoned. It began looking loved. One afternoon, while replacing rotten floorboards near the entrance, she heard uncertain footsteps outside. Looking up, she saw a young mother standing with 2 small children. Their clothes had been patched so many times that scarcely any original fabric remained. The woman removed her bonnet nervously. Miss Rowan? Adeline smiled warmly. Please come in. The woman hesitated before stepping across the doorway. I heard you've been repairing the chapel. A little each day. Would you mind if my children saw the inside? Adeline looked around the freshly swept sanctuary. I'd be honored. The little boy wandered quietly between the pews while his younger sister stared upward at the colored light dancing across the walls. Neither child spoke for several minutes. Finally, the girl whispered, Mama, it's beautiful. Their mother lowered her eyes. We haven't been inside a church since ours closed 5 winters ago. Adeline invited them to stay for bread and warm vegetable soup. During the meal, the woman introduced herself as Clara Whitmore. Her husband had died beneath a collapsed grain elevator 2 years earlier. Since then, she survived by washing clothes for wealthier families. "We once had our own farm," Clara admitted softly. "Near Willow Bend." Adeline asked the question that had become almost instinctive. "Did your family lose it?" Clara nodded. "My father-in-law always believed something dishonest happened with the deeds, but he died before proving anything." Another name. Another family. Another wound that matched the hidden records. Before leaving, Clara surprised Adeline by asking, "Would you mind if we returned sometimes? The children haven't smiled like this in months." Adeline looked around the quiet chapel. This place has waited a long time for voices again. Soon others began arriving. An elderly carpenter volunteered to repair broken benches without asking for payment. A widow brought curtains she had sewn from leftover cloth. Young boys gathered fallen stones to rebuild the crumbling garden wall. No one organized the effort. It simply happened. People who had almost forgotten one another slowly remembered how communities once worked before every hardship became someone else's burden. From the ridge above, Gideon Pike watched with growing fascination. Though employed by Blackridge, he had been born among the valley's poorer families. His own grandfather had often spoken bitterly about land mysteriously lost long ago. Watching neighbors work together around the chapel stirred memories he thought had vanished forever. One evening, after finishing his duties at the manor, Gideon quietly climbed the hill alone. Adeline was repairing one of the chapel doors when she noticed him approaching. "Can I help you?" she asked. He removed his hat awkwardly. "Maybe." His broad shoulders shifted uneasily. "Or maybe I can help you." She waited. "I work for Mr. Blackridge." Her expression remained calm, though her attention sharpened. "Then you've come with another offer?" "No." He looked over his shoulder to ensure no one had followed him. "I've come because I've heard conversations I don't think you should ignore." Adeline invited him inside. Gideon spoke quietly. "Mr. Blackridge believes you've found something hidden. Why would he think that?" "Because his father searched this valley for years, looking for records that disappeared before many farms changed ownership." Adeline kept her face carefully still. Gideon continued, "I've worked at the manor nearly 12 years. I've never seen him worried about anything." He paused. "Until now." She poured him a cup of tea. "What exactly worries him?" Gideon accepted the cup gratefully. "He doesn't know what you've found." "Suppose I found nothing?" Gideon smiled faintly. "Then he wouldn't keep sending people to watch your windows every night." Silence settled between them. Finally, Adeline asked, "Have you seen them?" "Twice this week." Her heart sank. She had suspected as much, but hoped she had imagined the distant figures beyond the tree line after sunset. Gideon leaned closer. "Miss Rowan, whatever you've discovered, don't keep it only here." She met his eyes. "Why?" "Because buildings can burn." Those words settled heavily inside the quiet chapel. Gideon rose to leave. At the doorway, he paused. Not every man working for Blackridge agrees with everything that's happened in this valley. He tipped his hat respectfully before disappearing into the gathering dusk. That night, Adeline barely slept. Long after midnight, she carried the survey journal, original maps, and letters to a second hiding place beneath loose stones inside the old cemetery wall. If disaster struck one location, the evidence would survive elsewhere. She understood now that protecting the truth mattered more than protecting herself. 3 mornings later, Sheriff Amos Gallo rode slowly toward the chapel. Unlike Horace Fenwick, the sheriff looked uncomfortable before even dismounting his horse. "Morning, Miss Rowan." "Sheriff?" He cleared his throat. "Mind if I ask a few questions?" "Of course." He removed his hat respectfully. "Several citizens have reported strangers visiting this property after dark. I've noticed them too." "You have?" "Yes." Gallo frowned. "Did you recognize anyone?" "No." The sheriff looked genuinely troubled. "If anyone threatens you, send word immediately." She studied him carefully. "Sheriff, may I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you believe justice always arrives eventually?" He sighed deeply before answering. "I'd like to." "That isn't the same as believing." His weathered face softened. My father served as sheriff before me. Near the end of his life, he told me there were decisions he wished he'd questioned more carefully. He looked across the valley toward distant farms. Sometimes a badge sees less than ordinary people imagine. Before mounting his horse again, he added quietly, "Whatever road you're walking, be careful who learns about it." As he rode away, Adeline realized something important. Even the sheriff carried quiet doubts about the valley's past. Perhaps more people questioned old injustices than Blackridge realized. Meanwhile, inside the manor, Horace Fenwick entered the study carrying disturbing news. The chapel has become popular. Blackridge looked up from his ledger. Explain. Families gather there every Sunday afternoon. Volunteers are repairing the building. People have begun calling it Hope Chapel again. Blackridge's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Hope is difficult to tax, he murmured. Horace hesitated before continuing. There's something else. Yes? The sheriff visited today. Blackridge closed his ledger. Interesting. Do you believe the girl has turned him against us? Blackridge stood slowly and walked toward the window overlooking the valley. No. His voice remained calm. Not yet. He rested one hand against the glass. But influence grows quietly, Horace. It rarely announces itself until it has already taken root. His eyes settled once more upon the little chapel standing proudly on the distant hill, where laughter from children drifted through open windows for the first time in decades, and for reasons even he could not fully explain. That simple sound unsettled him far more than any hidden ledger ever could. Years passed, and the little chapel that everyone once called a worthless ruin became the quiet heart of the valley once more. Its bell rang every Sunday, not to celebrate wealth or power, but to remind ordinary people that truth can sleep for years without ever dying. The forged deeds were overturned, the original land grants restored, and families who had believed their histories were lost forever finally walked the fields their grandparents had once called home. Silas Blackridge never shouted, never fought, and never escaped the truth. One by one, the very documents that had built his family's fortune became the evidence that unraveled it. His great house remained standing, but its influence faded with every season until it became little more than another landmark of a passing age. Adeline Rowan never asked for riches, titles, or recognition. She accepted only a modest cottage beside the restored chapel and spent the rest of her life preserving the valley's history so that no child would ever again inherit a lie disguised as fact. Travelers who crossed the mountain pass often asked why the people of the valley spoke her name with such quiet respect. The elders would simply smile, point toward the chapel, and say that sometimes the greatest treasure hidden behind an altar is not gold at all, but the courage of the one chosen to uncover it. And so, whenever the evening sun painted the old stained glass windows with colors that danced across the stone floor, the people remembered the orphaned girl who arrived with only $30, a weary heart, and nothing left to lose, yet left behind something far greater than wealth. She restored the truth, returned hope to forgotten families, and proved that the smallest act of faith can echo across generations. Perhaps that is why abandoned places are never truly empty. Sometimes they are simply waiting for the right soul to listen. Thank you for sharing this journey with us. If Adeline's story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. What is something others overlooked that turned out to be far more valuable than anyone imagined? Your stories inspire this community just as much as the ones we tell. And if you enjoy heartfelt frontier tales filled with mystery, resilience, and unforgettable endings, be sure to subscribe to Berry Tales. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story, and join us again for another journey into the forgotten corners of the Old West. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and stay close.